You're listening to 3-1 Greats, the podcast about North Louisiana and its best product, its people. And today we're celebrating another one, so let's get started. Jason, first off, thanks for coming on to talk about Flatwound and Stroope and yourself. I want to do this for everybody. I want to give a little bit of an intro. I'm reading this, by the way. Today's guest is Jason Griffin, but I'll be honest, no offense to Jason, but this is an episode I originally imagined having with 3-1 Great musician Shawn Stroope. I would have loved to have had him here today sharing stories about playing bass guitar for Percy Sledge, Dave Matthews, Jacob Dylan of the Wallflowers, and many other iconic musicians. Shawn should be sitting right here for this episode. He would have loved a podcast with this premise because he loved Northwest Louisiana and all of its quirks. Shout out Jordan Street. In November of 2024, after a long battle with cancer, Shawn passed away. His legacy and his impact, though, through the people that he knew, did not end. Jason Griffin is Shawn's close friend and board director of Flatwound Initiative, a nonprofit organization with a mission to support Shreveport-Bossier musicians in times of medical crisis by offering financial support and hope. Jason is helping tell not only Stroope's story, but Flatwound's role in continuing Stroope's passion for caring for local artists. As an attorney and entrepreneur, Jason is a guy who helps people untangle complicated messes for a living. But more importantly, he's a representative of the kind of person Shawn Stroope was. And in a lot of ways, this conversation is about carrying something forward, about legacy, friendship, and continuing the work when the person who inspired it all isn't here to do it themselves. Jason Griffin, welcome and thank you for coming with such an awesome purpose.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
So let's get right to it. Jason, first, tell us about Flatwound and the concert for Stroope coming up.
Sure. I guess the most immediate and pressing thing is the concert is happening on January 10th at 7 p.m. And you can get tickets at flatwound.org/tickets. It is at the Louisiana Boardwalk. The concert is a benefit concert to raise funds for the Flatwound Initiative's purpose. And the purpose of the charity is simply to help local musicians in a time of need, especially with health issues. Shawn Stroope himself, he was a member of the Recording Academy, like the Grammys. And during his battle with cancer, I would always ask Shawn, hey, where are you financially? Do we need to talk about this? How are we handling this? And he's like, don't worry about it. The Recording Academy is covering me. And so they actually had a fund that covered Academy members. And so basically Flatwound Initiative chooses to do the same thing for local Louisiana musicians who don't have access to something like the recording.
Do you feel like creatives and musicians are uniquely vulnerable when it comes to major illness and the damage it causes?
I totally think so. I mean, they are entrepreneurs in the most extreme way because they're running their own business, right? They don't have a employer that is putting a health plan together for them, figuring out any sort of, care issues that other employers might cover, such as retirement. And so they're exposed to all the elements, right? They're not shielded in any way by an employer. And let's face it, not all musicians, and matter of fact, most don't make that much money. They're doing it because they love it that much. And in some sense, they've made a conscious decision to forego economic success in order to pursue the love of this art. And that puts them exactly where you said they are. They're especially vulnerable because of that.
So the mission for Flatwound, how has that grown since Shawn's passing?
Well, it actually, I think it started in a big way right after his death. Sarah, his wife, and a few of his close friends decided that they wanted to carry on Shawn's legacy because his life was so short-lived, right? I think the group of friends was so impressed with what the Recording Academy had done for Shawn. And Shawn was so impressed with it because he had made a big deal about it to us, right? When he was trying to always calm us, right? He was the most relaxed person throughout his whole battle with cancer. He was always calming the rest of us down. And so I think he was, we wanted to continue that on. And that was a great way to remember, just to carry on his legacy. And I think also there's a secondary purpose in the sense of if musicians are taken care of in North Louisiana and the Shreveport area, we're going to help lift up local music, which was Shawn's ultimate lifetime mission.
Shawn definitely, I got to know him a few years back, and that definitely sounds like him, just being the calmest one through this struggle. And I know that he touched a lot of lives while he was here, and he was a connector, right? That's how
Mhm.
I remember him. Is just everybody knew Shawn, and Shawn knew everybody, and I just have a feeling I can assume that through all this, probably the stories came out like, oh, I'm going through this, and maybe another musician says, our buddy is going through this too. Have you had a lot of people reach out, or has Sarah, his wife, have you heard her say of how many people have reached out with similar struggles, but maybe they don't have the support of the Recording Academy?
Yeah, I mean, we actually just launched our website. As I said earlier, it's flatwound.org.
Flatwound.org.
There is a specific page where if people are in need, they can request help from us. When we did the concert last year, we actually raised approximately $16,500. And we quickly helped our first beneficiary, a guitar player named Joe Nadeau. I haven't met him personally, but he suffered a stroke, which prohibited him from playing. And so we spent a little under $4,000 helping pay rent and utilities for him, allowing just some short-term benefit while him and his family sought other sources of help. So we started off and already helped our first beneficiary.
And all those funds came from Concert for Stroop #1.
All of that was raised from the first concert last year.
That's awesome. And the next concert is Saturday. Was it January 10th? Is that right?
January 10th. If you knew Shawn, it's actually his birthday. And
That's
so
good.
that's
That's great.
that makes it even more special. So yes, January 10th at 7 p.m.
The Concert for Stroop 2, January 10th at 7 p.m. And you can buy tickets at Flatwound
/tickets.
/tickets. All right. We'll put a link up to. Uh, so
Appreciate that.
Yeah, no problem. We'll talk more about Shawn. I do want to talk about you. You're our guest today. So take us back. Where did you grow up?
Yeah, but I say Shreveport. I technically grew up across the border. My family had a ranch. It's much smaller now that my grandparents are no longer living. But I grew up in Lee, Texas, so just south of Caddo Lake. But I always went to school in Shreveport. And my dad works in Shreveport. You know, we always associated with Shreveport. People ask me where I'm from and they don't know the area, it's just easy to say Shreveport, or I even say I'm from Louisiana. But if we want to get more accurate, I'm a Texan. I've always been a Texan. It's just I grew up in a very porous area, right? I was on the border. So I'm a little bit of both Texan and Louisianan.
So I'm going to divulge something that I don't think you know about me. I know your brother. As a matter of fact, we were friends in middle school and in high school. You, I think, had
Okay.
left, but I heard stories. I heard stories about you, and of course, you probably know this. David idolized you, and you influenced him in a way that subsequently influenced me. I would not
Okay.
know who Adam Clayton, Larry Mullen Jr., The Edge, or Bono was if it weren't for Jason Griffin. So thank you so much for influencing David. And now I have one of my, if not my favorite band of all time, and that I've cherished and enjoyed for 3 decades now. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you bet. These days, U2's like the Rolling Stones, but I feel like in growing up in Shreveport, nobody was listening to that except people like
There was
Shawn
little
or
chance.
me.
Right. There was little chance of me finding you two if it wouldn't have been for the influence of David and his friend Matt Bozeman and
Uh-huh.
obviously you. So if it weren't for you, I'd probably be listening to like Nickelback or something like that. So I really appreciate it. Jason Aldean comes to mind as well. So thank God you saved me. So thank you for preaching the gospel of you two at an early age. So on top of that, I do want to clarify something that I think you've been afraid to say. You've said a little bit. I don't think it's Lee, Texas. Is it Karnak, Texas?
See, it becomes even more complicated. So technically it's Lee, but
Huh.
Lee
I've
is
never heard that.
the closest town is Karnak. And so the address,
Okay.
like the address, my parents' address even still is a Karnak address because that's where the post office is. But where they
So,
actually live, and still to this day, is Lee, Texas, which it's an unincorporated area. I don't even know how legal that name is. It's not since it's not incorporated, I think just people call it that, but it's not technically part of Karnak.
well, that's not necessarily in the 318 area code. So we won't call you 31 great yet. We'll call you 31 good, and we'll just see how well this episode goes.
I'll try to
You
earn it.
also said, my sources tell me that there was a change from a Wascom school to a Shreveport school. Can you tell us about that change?
Yeah, I mean, so I spent grade school at First Baptist, which, funny enough, that's the hot school again, from what I understand. Talking to
Really?
friends, yeah, and where you want to send your kids. And so I did that. And then about fourth grade, my parents pulled me out and put me in Wascom. So I went to Wascom for fourth and fifth grade. Loved it. I actually made a lot of friends. And then I guess Wascom ISD they figured out that I didn't live there. And so they kicked me out and I had to go back to private school because my parents didn't want to send me to Carnine,
Uh,
and which is what we
right.
were zoned to. So I went back to First Baptist and then ended up at Loyola for high school.
Okay. And where did you
And
meet
Shawn would
Stroop?
forever pick on me about that.
About Loyola or?
Yeah, yeah. He would always joke with me. I mean, we wore uniforms. Of course, you guys did at Evangel, but
Yeah.
we had to wear suits essentially, coat and tie. And he just, when I first met Shawn in high school, he always said I was preppy and treated it like it was a bad thing and called me Thurston Howell the Third.
That's
And
actually a pretty good nickname.
so that was kind of my nickname for probably a couple of years until I moved on to college.
Thurston Howe the third. I love it. And where did you meet Shawn?
I met Shawn because my parents had changed churches and moved to First Assembly of God.
Yeah.
Uh, and they had encouraged me to get involved with the youth group. And so I showed up at somebody's house one time and there were these two guys there. And we were kind of I guess we were on the fringe of the group. We weren't all in, but we weren't all out. And they it ended up being Shawn Stroope and another guy named Andre Groves. And Shawn and Andre went to Evangel together at the time. And we just all hit it off really quickly and started hanging out. I didn't necessarily feel I fit into high school, into a lot of the social groups. A guy like Shawn and a guy like Andre, we were all maybe not misfits, but we were on the outskirts of things. All right, we weren't always in the in crowd. So I found my tribe.
Found your tribe. Do you remember the first thing that you and Shawn bonded over?
You know, I I mean, that would have been like 1992, somewhere in there. It probably would have been music, right? Shawn was 2 years older than me, right? I was a sophomore in high school. He was a senior. In some sense, there's a little bit of little brother, big brother to our relationship. So Shawn was showing me the way. He was
Got
showing
it.
me, he was always cool. I wasn't cool. And Shawn would always try to teach me cool. And so he knew what music I liked, right? And you know, I was into things that were more maybe European or British. And or Irish, as we discussed with you too, and other people weren't. And Shawn's like, "Well, if you're into those bands, you need to listen to this music." And so I really kind of owe my education and my introduction into just the history of popular music to Shawn, right? I mean, we were listening to everything, and it was just something where we were always seeking knowledge in it, right? We would read the liner notes of albums together. And so, because we were trying to understand how music and the music industry worked. So it was probably sitting in his bedroom and just listening to music together, right? And doing something, Shawn was also, his personality was just, it was always silly, right? And there were
Yeah.
always innuendos to everything. So we would do stupid stuff like make a ceremony out of drinking peach knee-high while watching a Pauly Shore movie, and just stupid stuff. I mean, we were high school kids.
Something that I remember about Shawn was, and you said it when I guess it just jogged my memory, 1992, church, and especially the fundamentalist type of evangelical church that we went to. I went to First Assembly as well.
Well, and it wasn't your dad the drummer?
My dad was the drummer. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
he was the
Shawn
guy.
loved my dad.
He would flip his sticks while performing, and we always thought that was so cool.
Yeah. Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of the first times I ever met Shawn, he meant, your dad is so cool. And of course I hated that because it was my dad, and it was a little embarrassing to see him with his performances. But now I love it. Like he's my dad. He's cool. I still get people that come up and say, "Yeah, your dad's Jimmo Brock." Yeah, he is. Yeah, he still plays drums. He's almost 80. He still plays.
Oh, wow.
So
That's really cool. Well, you have to be fit to play
yeah,
drums.
thank you. What's that? Yeah, you do. You do. So one thing that I guess going back to music and our church and that fundamentalist evangelical, I guess atmosphere is bands from Ireland or Europe were seen as completely secular and a little bit taboo in that group that you met Shawn in. And
yeah.
that's one thing that I will always remember about Shawn is he had this otherworldly, I would say, character about him that would just kind of slice through all the BS. And I remember him being like, "Oh, come on. Like that's not really how the world works, and that's not how Christianity works." And I love that he was able to slice through legalism and get to the beauty of life and music and the beauty of music. And that's something that I think a lot about when I think of Shawn. Obviously his silliness, you hit the nail on the head there. And yeah, that brought me back hearing that. So let's talk about that. Like, how did community, and just the community you grew up around play a role in forming your worldview?
Yeah, I mean, it was a big part. And I think Shawn, I think we both were trying to figure out things together. You're right
Mm.
that he innately, he could always see through the legalism of that religious culture we grew up with, right? And it wasn't really something necessarily that his parents taught him or his grandparents. Like, that was just something innate to him where he just could see through it. Right. I think, my dad was one of the pastors for a while at Assemblies of God. And so we were always, I think I felt probably more of the pressure of that legalism than Shawn did, just because, like what you're saying, with everybody knew you're Jim O'Brock's kid. They knew that I was John Griffin's son, right? And I think, and you're the preacher's kid, you're always in that spotlight. So I think it was a real part of my life. It was also something I pushed against, right? It didn't totally fit me, right? There were and even to this day, I look at it, there were so many great lessons I learned from it, but it was also something that I couldn't totally fit in to.
Yeah, I feel you.
And I think that was something that Shawn, and going back to meeting Shawn and Andre, that was what we bonded over, is that
Yep.
seeing the beauty in all that and what we were able to get from it. And we viewed ourselves as very spiritual people, and we were using the tools that we were being taught in that environment. But at the same time, we were like, hey, that doesn't fit me. That doesn't work. This particular piece, this thing,
Hmm.
right? You know, and of course, I think it was very apparent in a place like First Assembly because football was so much a part of that church culture. And so if you didn't play
Yep.
football, I mean, were you worth anything? Right. And here we
Or
didn't.
where did you
I
fit
mean, I
in?
played a
Right.
little football at Loyola, but it wasn't my thing. And so, we were already on the outside of things. But I think it was a very formative piece uh, I, of both of our lives. But I will say I was struggling with that. I was wrestling with that ever since I was a kid. My dad had his own church even like when I was a kid
Yeah.
out in Lee, and he made me preach one time. And of course, unlike my dad, I hated public speaking. I'm scared of it. And it was probably the shortest sermon and was probably very appreciated by the congregation because I got them in and out. But the subject was the difference between spirituality and religion. And so even at an early age, that was already something I was like, hey, something doesn't naturally fit there, right? Or it does, maybe not everybody, rules are there for a reason as guidelines, but maybe we have to understand what things mean for ourselves spiritually. So,
Yeah. What do you feel that your friendship with Shawn taught you about faith?
well, I think it's a very personal thing, right? For each individual, right? And it's something you really have to seek out, uh, but
Hmm.
but it's yours, and nobody should be able to tell you what that is, right? You seek it out yourself.
Yeah. It's a personal journey.
Yeah.
One of the great things that I can attest to with people around North Louisiana who are still there, for the majority of my friends there, when we see each other, sometimes maybe after years, it's as if we pick up right where we left off. And there's the kindred spirit. And did you feel that way with Shawn? Like, could you guys pick up right where you left off?
Yeah, totally. I mean, Shawn and I moved away from Shreveport 1994 to go to college. I moved off to Austin to University of Texas. And so our relationship became one where it was a lot of making an effort to see one another, whether that
Yeah.
was me coming
Right.
home on the holidays or talking on the phone back then, or what turned into us making trips. And so, yeah, I think like we would I think, and I've thought about this, especially since Shawn's passing, is that Shawn was, because he was always somewhere else from me, I, I got very comfortable to the role he even has now with me, if you will. I always felt his presence. I felt his influence, right? I felt the, the ripples of the experiences we had together, or maybe the words that he's shared with me. So, yeah. And on this particular subject, I remember we hadn't hung out with each other in a year or two, maybe. I mean, we'd probably seen each other, but we hadn't spent a lot of time together. And so his cancer had gone into remission. And so we planned a trip and went to New York. And so we both flew to New York, and I had thoughts about that of, hey, I haven't spent that like a long period of time together. And here we're spending like a long weekend together in a
Yeah.
hotel, sharing a hotel room together.
Yeah.
And, we planned this whole trip where it was going to be jazz New York. We were only going to go to jazz clubs, and we end up, that's all we did. We went to jazz clubs at night and comedy clubs afterwards. And it was just like when we were kids, right? I mean, the conversation, Shawn and I would talk late into the night, right? And that continued while we were even on that trip to New York together, which was what,
Mm,
at this point, 2 years ago.
that's cool. You guys saw a lot of shows, a lot of live acts. Does one stick out in particular that was just extra awesome?
Well, I wouldn't say we've seen a lot of shows together
Okay.
necessarily, but I mean, he's seen a lot of shows, right? I mean, he was in the
Yeah.
business. So Shawn loves this bass player, Pino Palladino, and he's a jazz musician. But funny enough, he was the touring bass player for Nine Inch Nails, right? So,
Nice.
you know, gotta, gotta find work. But this guy is heavily respected, and he was Shawn's
Right.
hero.
Right.
Well, I think what made it the most memorable show was we were at Blue Note. We were at the table right there up against the stage. Like my knee was touching the stage like it is the table I'm sitting at right now. And Pino Palladino is right there, uh, you know, feet away from us, playing his bass guitar. That
Uh,
was a memorable concert just because of the intimacy of it. I think what was a memorable concert for me was when Shawn was in, and kind of bring it back full circle to the U2 thing. And I forget what year it was. I think 2004, but Shawn knew the Blade brothers, Brady and Brian. Matter of
yeah.
fact, I understand there a few Blades will be at the concert, including their
Nice.
father, this
Wow.
January 10th. But Brian was working with Daniel Lanois, who, if you are a U2 fan, Daniel Lanois was one of the producers, one of the co-producers of Joshua Tree, Achtung Baby. I mean, all, yeah, and more albums, but obviously those were the big hits. But Shawn was the bass player at this show, and I got to watch Daniel Lanois play music in Shreveport with Shawn as the bass player. And I have it on video on my phone, but that was memorable. And I think it meant a lot to me because in my mind, I saw that Shawn was reaching great heights in his career. And that was about the time that he probably did become a part of the Recording Academy. He did record with Daniel Lanois on a particular album, on his album, I think it's Joy.
Hmm.
And that meant the world because when we were kids, we were reading about these guys in liner notes, right? And it was just cool to see my friend succeed like that.
One thing I noticed about Shawn is um, he was not a personal promoter. Like he was not a bragger of playing with, Dave Matthews or whomever. But gosh, when you look at the catalog of his work, I didn't even know he was a member of the Academy. That's amazing. So he was just this, this quiet doer, and his talent was just exceptional. I don't think people know how exceptionally good he was at his craft. He really
Yeah, I
was
think
an awesome musician.
the people who knew, they could just see it, right?
Yes, absolutely. You had obviously from afar, but you did have, a time of watching Shawn go through his illness. How did that impact you?
Well, I mean, I watched Shawn go through this illness twice. So, when he was 20-ish, this is before he met Sarah, but he had testicular cancer. So I watched him go through all that. And then it all went away, right? And that's when
Mm,
he really
yeah.
began the career that we know him to have done, right? This is when he really planted his roots in Shreveport. I think until then, he was destined for something else. And I think, and actually, this is a story worth telling that goes back to the earlier thing with Daniel Lanois. Why that meant so much is at that time, here he's gone off to Nashville, he's doing things. But when Shawn and I mean, I was probably a freshman in college. I was working in Shreveport, though, over the summer. And we decided to go camping, right? Or maybe I was a senior in high school. I don't know. And I probably was because my parents were upset with me for doing this. But we decided we were going to go camping in Arkansas, right? Just across the border, some state park. So we leave. We're driving into Arkansas and we're talking music. We're talking about what we're going to do with our lives. It's nighttime. We keep driving, right? And we keep driving. And then I remember it's this Tracy Chapman song comes on the radio. It's the bluesy one, it's like, give me one reason to stay here.
Hmm.
And it inspired us to just keep driving. We drove all the way to Memphis that night. And Shawn, I guess, was old enough to rent a hotel room. And so we rent, we go to Beale Street, we walk around, we slide down the hill where in Rattle and Hum they do that when they were recording at some
Yeah.
studios. The next day we wake up and Shawn's like, I've heard BB King's name is in the phone book and that we can call him. And so he calls and yeah, and BB King's wife picks up and he's like, is Mr. King there? Right? And she's like, no, baby, he ain't here right now. And Shawn's like, okay, all right, well, tell him that I was looking for him. Or so, Shawn just would be smooth in a situation like that. I was probably just choking and dying laughing. But he always attributed that trip as like, that's what made him believe he could go off and actually make a career of music, right? It was shortly after that he did go to Nashville. So when he had that first bout of cancer, I saw it just, in my mind, it kind of took him away from that. He was already working with bands like Jars of Clay. Even early on, he knew a number of bands that were quite popular at the time and Nashville based, and gets back to Shreveport. So then fast forward to this time around, I remember the first time Shawn told me he had colon cancer. I remember I was on a vacation. I was in Asheville, North Carolina, and he calls and says, hey, I need to tell you something. I don't want you to worry, which was his thing. He's like, I'm in the best shape I've ever been, which it was. He'd really gotten healthy, just working out, as it tends to hit some people in their late 40s. And he was like, hey, you need to go get a colonoscopy, right? Had they found this earlier, this would have been easy. But I think he was really hopeful at that time. And so I was hopeful with him. And I guess watching him go through it, of course, I wasn't living with him day to day, but he probably also filtered out a lot of information of what he was having to deal with to me. But, you didn't want to see your friend suffering. That was painful to see it slow him down, right? And I had actually just had a great experience with him where during COVID, my younger son likes to sing. And I wanted him to have something to remember from the COVID years, essentially. And I talked to Shawn, and my son recorded a few songs at Foxtrot Studios, and Shawn put a few musicians together who, some of them are actually playing at the concert on January 10th. So we had a really good time. I'd seen how good Shawn was doing. And so, it perhaps was rough watching him really go through. It was tough to watch him go through this fight. And I saw him even just a few days before he died. He was in Houston, or I came to see him.
Yeah.
And he was like, Sarah had called me and I was in my car, I remember, and she's like, you need to get up here. He's not going to last long. And I think that's probably when it hit me the most. I mean, I showed up at the hospital. I was dressed in all black, emoting my feelings through my clothing.
Yeah.
And Shawn's just telling jokes the whole time, right? And, ultimately what killed him was not the cancer, but jaundice, right? Because they couldn't fight the cancer anymore. So he basically, he died of jaundice. And this guy was during that time making playlists called Billy Rubin, right? Which, that's the substance that causes jaundice. But he was just telling stories the whole time. And it was hard not to be, he made it where you just didn't fall into the trap of grief, right?
Yeah.
Because you wanted to spend those happy moments with it.
That's the awe-inspiring thing that I think that I've seen just watching this from afar is Shawn made something so grotesque and heartbreaking almost palatable, and just through his joy and his joy for life and his joy for the people around him. I'm kind of like you. I left North Louisiana over a decade ago. I stayed in touch with a lot of those guys. I knew Shawn growing up, and I didn't know him as well as most of his friends, but there was a pick up right where you left off type of mentality when I did see him on occasion when I would come in, and it always circulated around music, but there was always this joy around, that just this aura around him, and that did not change with these dire circumstances. And that was so profoundly fascinating and just awe-inspiring. So it's so cool to even hear you say it, someone closer to the source, because you always think about my 5,000-foot bird's eye view of this whole situation. Well, there got to be moments that were different and that were less flowery. But man, I totally get it why so many people would rally around him even after his life is over and carry on his legacy. I typically go, this is going to be an awkward segue because what we're talking about is a heavy subject, but we typically at some point in this podcast go through a rapid fire question and answer of Shreveport or North Louisiana or East Texas related stuff. So we're going to do that right now. Okay.
Okay.
And this is going to, and this is going to gauge you on how great of a 3-1 great you are. So I hope you feel the pressure. I hope you are nervous.
I'm a little nervous. It's late in the day. I've been
good.
out skiing. My mind's tired. I'm out of coffee.
The altitude is going to get. Shawn would approve of these questions, I believe. So here's the first one. Just down from First Baptist Church, there was a street where everyone would go sledding in the rare occasions that it would ice over. What was that place's name?
Wasn't that Gilbert? Was it?
It was
I know
Gilbert.
What you're talking about.
Do you remember the name of the hill?
No, I do not. I know what you're talking about.
Okay. Thrill Hill. But you got the
right.
street right, which is insane. Nobody knows.
It was still good just to drive down it on a car.
Right. So, okay, next question. You got that one half right. I like that you said Gilbert. Next question is Thrill Hill on Gilbert Road, is it tall?
Is it tall?
Is it a tall hill?
Is this a trick question?
It is. The answer is no. It is not tall.
No? Okay. I mean, it's not like what I can look at right here in Colorado.
Next question. Are you the only high schooler ever to rock a burgundy Cadillac with a cloth top?
Probably.
Okay, good. Yes, that's correct. And last question. This place was the best place to get strawberry pie off of Kings Highway.
Well, I think Shawn would slap me if I didn't know this one, but Strawn's.
That's right. Congratulations, Jason. You are 3-1 great. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And just, I mean, to reiterate why you're here and why we decided to do this episode, and that's for the Flatwound Initiative and the concert for Stroope, which is on Shawn Stroope's birthday, January 10th at 7 p.m. You can get tickets at flatwound.org/tickets.
Tickets.
Perfect. Thanks so much. Have a great time skiing. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year's to you. Take care, Kenneth. Thank you.
When you're from the 318